Thank you. It's such a tremendous pleasure to be back here. I thought I would actually begin with where I left off last year when I spoke in the very last plenary of this time last year. I wanted to revisit the topic with which we began today, or yesterday, on values and how to channel them into ethical and democratic conversations about bioethics. And in order to excavate those values, I wanted to go back to what I said again a year ago. I want to think about how even scientists, as well as academics, researchers, and doctors imagine the power of genetics. Because I think we've talked about cognitive dissonance, and I experience that a great deal in the classes that I teach. And I sometimes ask my students, and I teach quite interdisciplinarily, so they include geneticists, they include medical students, they include medical narrative students, as well as law students, and a variety of anthropology and journalists, graduate students. And I ask them to draw a cartoon depicting how they imagine the DNA in their bodies. And no matter how sophisticated their science backgrounds, what they draw is almost relentlessly pre-modern. Images of little scurrying men, Leonardo da Vinci's extended, ideal man, pictures of the Book of Life. One of my favorites was a Harvard beanie. He felt that it was definitely a genetic marker for him. To my students, the genome is a set of little drones, according to them, circulating just beneath the skin. It is a womb inside each cell, or a microscopic self curled fetally in the appendix. It's a tiny scroll in a gold box located just behind the thorax. It's a mini brain with a little engine that's churning all the time. It is a biological Torah in the arc of the body. And it was, again, the clarity and persuasiveness of these framing metaphors and tropes in the hearts of even the most secular and scientific souls that I found so intriguing, because, of course, these are images of religious faith and karma and lead into gold and holy text and the resurrection of the body, as well as of color, race, class entitlement, and endowment, and these filters are relentlessly persistent. And so I wanted to sort of categorize them to, again, excavate the values that they embody on a conscious or unconscious level. And first of all are the visual, because I think the power of visual suggestion is huge in our culture and becoming more so. And it is the stuff that we are often completely unconscious of. So, for example, to give a somewhat related example, but not specific to genetics, during the last election, I have a friend who's a graphic artist who observed that the Obama logo, remember the big Obama logo, very much echoes the Chanel lettering, the lettering of Chanel, remember, on all his posters? So it appealed to an elegant upscale crowd, while McCain's logo, the one with the star over it, was identical. Apparently it's a 1970s logo, and it's identical to that of Jimmy Dean pork sausage. Then there was the verbal dimension of suggestion in the rhetoric to which we bring, and the power of this. So again, imagine that we try to block out the visual. Just let's close our eyes and focus on the words with which we wrap this new technology. And we try to divine the figuration of human destiny contained in our vocabulary about genetics. For our rhetoric is just as important and is as subtly, powerfully, unconsciously suggestive as our busy pictures. There's a linguist at Stanford named Lera Boroditsky, by whom I'm really intrigued, and she observes empirically that, for example, people have different responses depending upon the language they speak and how that language is gendered. So, for example, the word bridge is masculine in Spanish and French, le pont, something like that, but it's masculine in German. And speakers of French and Spanish and most Romance languages therefore tend to describe bridges as sturdy, strong, serviceable, and mighty. But speakers of German, where bridge is feminine, tend to describe bridges as elegant, beautiful, and graceful. And so this is very deep and just associative, it's suggestive. And I think similarly, the etymology of words like genes, genius, genus, are rooted in very deep and unconscious ancient myths. Similarly, the word eugenic is a word that captures a huge sense not only of my personal entitlement, but of whole human entitlement, of destiny, of fate, of unstoppable inevitability, and what was just meant to be allowing us to render invisible or just allows us to render invisible all sense of boundary, humility, exorcised and exercised hubris, trammeled dignity, and ultimately, I think mutilation in the name of improvement, do no harm, ends up having no meaning, where doing harm in the name of progress or self-improvement means never having to say you're sorry. So what do we do? Let me address an example that might illustrate this channeling effect of values, albeit in a specifically American context, for which I apologize, and then I'll try to draw it out into the international one. Many of you probably remember the Ashley X case, the pillow angel. She was a girl who had a form of encephalopathy that caused her brain to stop developing at about the age of 3 to 8 months, as I recall, and she smiled. She seemed at times to recognize her family members and to enjoy music, but she couldn't move by herself, would never learn to speak. And when she was 6, Ashley's parents subjected her body to a series of interventions ostensibly designed to keep her small, easy to lift, and thus less prone to bed sores and to render her permanently childlike. So to these ends, her breast buds are removed, and her appendix was removed, so because it was feared she wouldn't be able to communicate her distress if she ever did get appendicitis. She was given sufficiently high qualities of estrogen to ensure that her growth plates would close, limiting her height. Her uterus was removed to spare her the pain of menstrual cramps, or as her parents put it, pregnancy in the event of rape. So, as somebody put it, Nuremberg is no more. And putting our values to work in this example, you first have to ask, how on earth did Ashley's parents just waltz into the hospital and ask for what they wanted and have it delivered up in the scarifying modification of their child's body, like so much Kentucky Fried Chicken with a side of fries? After all, it is actually against the law to sterilize a minor without appointing a guardian or representative to the best interests of the child. It is stunning, as a matter of procedure and ethics, that experimentation with hormones and breast bud removal and unnecessary appendectomy sailed on through the Oversight Committee and the hospital's review board. What happened, I think, is a growing tendency to see everything from a consumerist perspective. We've observed this. But her parents actually used the vocabulary of purchasers. And the doctors, therefore, became providers. And the outcome was a less burdensome, to them, the purchasers, package. If Ashley, however, had been a patient, if she had been wrapped or cabined in the vocabulary of patient, rather than the object of a contract, there might have been some recollection that her body, in fact, was healthy. The inconvenient weight of it was not per se a disease, but an inefficiency to others. Again, I don't question how much Ashley's parents love their daughter or how overwhelming their responsibilities must be. I do, however, believe that the hospital allowed ethical questions about Ashley's long-term care and comfort to be privatized by deferring so unquestioningly to her parents' posited love. The hospital created an extreme presumption in favor of often cash-strapped caretakers that was heedless of medical necessity. I think also it helps to I sometimes ask my students to sort of imagine a set of concentric circles of values and of interests, and that the center of it is the most personal, the most intimate, and that is Ashley herself. And then you move outward, and you have the interest of Ashley plus her parents in the society of her parents. From there you move out, and you have Ashley plus her parents, plus perhaps a home health care worker. Then that of her doctors, the world of her hospital, the state health regulations and laws. Then perhaps, with increasing moral interest and value, the constitutional interest in making a public space in which we, citizens, may be accommodated, enfranchised, and treated for our inalienable right to the integrity of our bodies. And then, on an even larger level, the international norm of respect for the dignity of our humanity, our inherent worth, regardless of our nationality or immigration status or geographic place, or our mental capacity on the planet. So here is a very brief condensation of values reflected in various fields of law, going from that most private, intimate area where probably the law has no role, to that larger one, the largest one, in order from least moral value in state regulation, as in self-acting alone, with no discernible detriment or interaction with others, to greatest moral value, which is the claim for government intervention, as in human trafficking or perhaps mutilation. And I just say this I want to read you this list because I think law suits styled as constitutional law toward the heavily moral, expansive end of the list will tend for all of us to have a greater societal and therefore structural impact than those brought in contract, as in, I'm a consumer and I didn't get the particulars of my contract. And so I offer this as something to bear in mind as you frame either legal claims or political action. That the intimate Ashley is a pure self, and that is limited to contract exchange, mutually assumed obligation. Then, expanding out, you have self plus dominion over objects or real estate, like imposed boundaries and control of wealth generation from ownership and usufruct. Then self plus wronged person or entity, which is no longer contract but tort, which is an imposed obligation regarding negligence, recklessness, dishonesty, general duty of care to others. And I think that part of the vocabulary that some of our students, as well as Ashley's parents, don't even get to the moral expansive level of tort, which is a general duty of care to others, but are still in, you know, the private sense of, you know, this, you know, we're in the center of the private bubble. Then there's self and society, which sort of overlaps with things like crimes, and an imposed obligation regarding not harm necessarily to a particular person, but a societal interest in public order. Then self and polity, which is, again, constitutional law, imposed obligations for a citizenship, treason, violation of national interest, and that which constitutes us, the constitutive interest. The self, finally, and humanity, an international order of human rights, value and dignity and integrity of the body. And I think the cost in seeing only the self as free agent, economic actor, rational decision maker, the center of that set of concentric circles, the narrow self, the inner rings of concern and narrowed remediation, of being a consumer rather than a patient, of being a buyer or a seller rather than a citizen, is that we watch with distress our students on one side of the globe, like Asagi's and Dorothy's and mine and several of others of us who were talking, who see nothing, who see no evil in allowing unregulated, unaccountable forms of experimentation with the human germline, never mind with their own DNA. And on the other side of the world, we watch with distress the child in China who sells his kidney for an iPad, or the child in India who committed suicide recently so her parents could sell her organs. But, and I actually got this out of a newspaper, unfortunately, they didn't find her note about their daughter's oxymoronic gift of, quote, saleable organs until after they had cremated her. So the gesture was wasted. Thank you.